All right, let's make a start. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. And welcome to this webinar that forms part of Gogla's Consumer Protection Programme. We'll be exploring how the off-grid solar sector can empower consumers with better information, disclosure and understanding, and improving their experience and enhancing business outputs. So before I start, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Rebecca Rhodes, and I'm the project manager for consumer protection and circularity at Gogla. And I'd also like to recognise the funders of our consumer protection programme, which is CDC, with support from UK Aid, the Dune Foundation and FMO. We are recording the session today, so it will be available afterwards on our Consumer Protection Hub. And there'll be a few opportunities to ask questions throughout the next hour. So please just drop your questions in the chat or the question box, and we'll come to them as soon as we can. So to kick off the webinar, next slide, please, Book. So I'd like to officially launch the briefing note for the principle of transparency, which is part of the Consumer Protection Code. Over the last few months, we've spoken to a lot of companies and we've delved into what we can learn from other sectors, namely the MFI and digital finance sectors, on how, as a sector, we can improve consumer-facing transparency, how it can impact customer satisfaction, repayment rates, and how a lack of transparency poses a risk to consumers and can negatively impact business growth and portfolio quality. So we've brought all of this together in the briefing notes, and it's available now on our Consumer Protection Hub, or the link here, which we'll also send the slides out afterwards. So please go and check it out if you get the time and if you haven't already done so. And our aim at Gogla is to keep adding to the library of resources for off-grid solar companies. And for those companies who've made a commitment to the Consumer Protection Code and are looking to make improvements to how they work with their consumers. And as we make a start, we'll just have a quick poll just to test the water. So when was the last time you fully read the terms and conditions that you later accepted? Okay, so let me just share the results. So yeah, it seems like most people just don't have time to read terms and conditions and are not too bothered about the consequences there. So if you read the small print as well, the actual question was, when was the last time you fully read and understood terms and conditions that you were presented with? So it's just demonstrating that, even in our own lives, we know that we should read the terms and conditions, but we generally skip over them, and it's definitely the same for the off-grid solar consumers as well. So I think it's really up to us to do the best we can to kind of increase their understanding, make sure that the key points of the terms and conditions are really known and easy to grasp and understand. So, next slide, please. Yeah, so I'll just run you through the agenda before we kick off. We'll start with lessons and insights from outside of the sector and how we can apply those to the sector, and then look at some experiences from an off-grid solar company in Cameroon. And then my colleague Book will take you through the recommendations for off-grid solar companies on how we can improve in this area. We'll have a Q&A after each presentation, and again at the end if there's any questions remaining. Next slide. Just to introduce our two wonderful speakers today, we have Juan Carlos from CGAP, the Senior Financial Sector Specialist, and Leila Ayad from UPOA, who's the Responsible Methods and ESMS Manager. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Juan Carlos to take us through.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rebecca, and thanks, Kogla, for your invitation for me to participate in this very important and interesting webinar. I'll be glad to share some insights on the importance of transparency in the use of financial products, especially in the digital era that CGAP has produced in the past 5 years or so. We believe that transparency is a key aspect that needs to be addressed, especially when innovative products are offered to vulnerable customers in emerging markets. And we believe that transparency has to be carried out in an effective and customer-centric manner so that it can really lead to positive customer outcomes. In this context, I would like to start with first a slide or a short reflection of why we think that it's important to think about consumer protection from a customer outcomes perspective. So in the next slide, we'll see that, the next one, that we have 3 special considerations. We've seen the traditional consumer protection approaches have continuously faced challenges for customers, for providers, and for authorities. Time and time again, we've learned that consumers are not receiving adequate value from the use of digital financial services. In most cases, they've been expected to request, read, analyze, compare, and make smart decisions based on complex, detailed, long technical information, and to identify practices that violate rules or merit complaints. And often, vulnerable consumers are exposed to risks that may eventually leave them worse off. From the side of providers, in many cases, we have seen them struggle to link customer value with business value. And they have tended to see consumer protection rules and standards as more of a tick box exercise. Although, fair to say that some are starting to see the merit in adapting a customer outcomes focused approach and treating customers fair. Now, regulatory, supervisory, and self-regulatory authorities in general, for many years have focused on more detailed prescriptive rules or standards that aim to mitigate consumer harm in the short term, which is of course good. But in many cases, they have missed to engage with providers to see consumer protection in a more proactive and holistic manner that aims to offer more of a long-term value to consumers. So in recent years, there has been more of a recognition of the importance to shift and change the consumer protection paradigm. So in the next slide, we'll see how this is evolving recently. There used to be more of a focus on a buyer beware approach that puts the biggest onus on customers, to more of a seller beware approach that puts a bigger responsibility in providers who have better capacity to not only avoid customer harm, but also empower customers and promote the generation of consumer value that in turn contributes to longer-term business value, positive intermediate consumer outcomes, and ultimately good customer well-being. So that's an important point, because consumer protection is just one part of a bigger concept now that leads to also thinking about customer value and customer well-being. In this context, our recent research has identified 5 core common customer outcomes that we'll see in the next slide. These are suitability and appropriateness, choice, safety and security, fairness and respect, and voice. And all of these leading to a next level outcome of meeting the purpose of for consumers. The definition of choice that CGAP has come up with is that I, as a consumer, can make an informed decision, an informed choice among a range of products, services, and providers based on appropriate and sufficient information and advice that are provided in a transparent, affordable, and easy to understand way. So this is a more recent approach that we believe is quite promising in terms of looking at consumer protection in a more comprehensive, holistic manner. And we are seeing multiple countries already thinking about this type of approach. This is just as important background based on how CGAP and we believe the industry is moving in terms of looking at consumer protection in a more comprehensive and holistic manner. Now, in the next part of the presentation, with the next slide, the main objective for me is to share with you what some research that CGAP has done in recent years has told us on the importance of effective disclosure to empower consumer decision making. So let's go with the next slides that are based on lab tests that CGAP led a few years ago. For example, this one is based on a lab test in Mexico, where consumers were presented with different formats of key fact statements to find what information was most useful to them. We found that showing the total cost of credit in amount terms increased the probability of choosing the cheapest credit product by 8%. This was a much higher effect than that of showing the total cost of credit in percentage terms. The effect was just 2%. It's an important finding that clarity in transparency in terms of just simple language, simple amounts can be quite impactful for consumers. In the next slide, we'll see that we also checked whether the levels of financial literacy of the users could have any effect. And we observed that showing an improved key facts statement had more than twice the effect on consumers choosing a low-cost loan than the consumers having a higher than average level of financial literacy. That's another very interesting finding for us, seeing that actually better transparency can have more effect than levels of financial literacy. The next slide tells us the result of a very interesting lab test we did with a digital lender in Kenya to show the effects of improved disclosure in a mobile phone setting. We tested two ways of presenting the repayment amounts. The first one on the left indicated principal and fees altogether, repay 228. The second one on the right separated the finance fees from the loan principal, saying repay 200 plus 28. This may seem like a small effect, a small change. However, the effects were quite important. The second option that clarified the interest rate, the cost much better, helped consumers make better borrowing decisions. And the next, if you just click, we'll see that their default rates on first loan cycles in the lab setting decreased from 29% to 20%, 9% point difference, important effect. In the next slide, we'll see another disclosure format test in Kenya. A group of consumers saw the typical menu they would see when trying to request a loan with this digital lender. This menu would have the view terms and conditions option as the last one in the main menu. So it was kind of easy for consumers to easily skip viewing it and just click the option 1 and proceed to choose a loan amount. The second screen has two options of loan amounts. The consumers then were presented an alternative option, which was to move the option of viewing terms and conditions to a second separate screen and turn it into an active choice that the consumer must make right after selecting the request a loan option. This, that can be a small change, led to an important effect. This change greatly increased viewership of terms and conditions in the lab experiment from 9.5% to 23.8%, as you'll see with the next. And even we can do one more click and we'll see that this in turn led to a 7 percentage point drop in the delinquency rates in this lab setting. It's very interesting. So we are seeing how small changes in disclosure can lead to active actions to read information, to better understand, which may eventually lead to better repayment. So we can see that there is an interesting potential finding in these lab tests: increasing transparency, increasing understanding of consumers, which may improve repayment behavior. Well, actually, in more recent research of digital credit in Kenya and Tanzania, we have even further signs of these effects, as we'll see in the next slides. Because we thought, let's go deeper into actual data of actual borrowers in the digital credit space. And we'll see in 2016 and 2017, we were able to survey consumers before and after a decision taken by the Competition Authority of Kenya that require all digital financial service providers to disclose the costs of their products on the mobile handset. Before this decision was taken, M-Shwari borrowers were unable to correctly estimate the cost of 500 shilling loans and 1,000 shilling loans, whereas 52% were able to correctly estimate the smaller 200 shilling loans. After the transparency decision was issued, and those providers offering M-Shwari loans improved disclosure of fees, we could see a significant increase from consumers in their estimation of loan costs. Now they were actually able to correctly estimate the cost of 1,000 loan in 56% of consumers. So the majority of consumers were able to do this estimation, and 80% correctly estimated the 200 loan. So an important effect. Now in the next slide, we'll see even more interesting findings. We conducted a phone survey on experiences with digital credit in Kenya and Tanzania, and we saw very high percentages of borrowers who reported poor transparency concerning levels. Some common issues were that borrowers were charged fees they didn't expect, or that they didn't fully understand the cost of fees. A very concerning subsequent finding was that the levels of late repayment and default were higher for those who reported poor transparency. We will see that in the next slide. The columns in a darker shade of blue and green show that those who reported poor transparency have higher levels of late repayment and higher levels of loan default in both countries. So this in a way reinforces the importance of transparency as a very important factor to improve consumer protection, which may lead to good repayment. And actually, we saw that in the cases of Kenya and Tanzania, late repayment and default are actually very concerning. We'll see in the next slide the levels of those indicators were pretty relevant. So this is an important point, that how by improving transparency, we believe these levels could reduce. Now, I would like to end my presentation just highlighting that we as CGAT are very much a strong supporter of the work that Google is doing on consumer protection and the messages that are included in this recent briefing note transparency. We believe that effective transparency can lead to positive consumer outcomes, especially if we go beyond point of sale disclosure, if we avoid information overload and present biases. This means we could and we should focus on simple, non-misleading communication throughout the product life cycle, and that there are efforts to monitor whether the information provided to consumers actually empower them to make better financial decisions. I'll end here and I'll be happy, of course, to receive any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Just really, really interesting to see that actual, the real life data and results, making that link between better payment outcomes and better transparency. If anybody does have a question, please just feel free to add either to the chat box or the Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. But I will start it off. So in the briefing note, we explore a little about the ongoing challenge of disclosure of effective interest rates for pay-as-you-go solar. At the moment, we recommend in the Consumer Protection Code the disclosure of total cost of ownership to really kind of simplify that figure and that understanding for customers. But we acknowledge that as a sector, we still don't have visibility and real understanding of what the financing interest rate is. And we still have lots of work to do to kind of decouple the service, the product and the financing for consumers. From your opinion and your experience, what would be the major benefits to consumers of having access to that extra layer of information?
This will be very, very important and beneficial to them. Multiple exercises we have done, not only the past 5 years, but I'm telling you for more than 10 years, especially in the credit space, so traditional consumer credit right after the global consumer financial crisis, and then more recently on digital credit. What we are seeing is that consumers that know better what the actual cost of a product, the more they know about it, the better they will be in terms of making an informed decision. So giving them some better idea of what would be the actual cost of financing in simple amounts will help them understand what would be the responsibility later on. And then reminding them through the life of the product, what are their responsibilities that they have to repay. It's just helping them to make decisions in an informed manner. Otherwise, these consumers that are especially low income, vulnerable, who have many things in their mind, will have a harder time to understand all these different factors, the cost, the fees, any multiple topics. Just give them a simpler way of knowing what they need to repay later. And that would help them think about it and take a decision about the product. And actually, the other point is they will trust providers better. They will have a more engagement and a trustful engagement with providers to know that, the language, the way of communicating with providers is just easy, and they don't need to become a mathematician to understand all the different types of costs involved in a product that can be very useful to them.
Yeah, very good point. I think simple and clear is a good takeaway there. Okay, so we will have, if we've got time at the end, we will have hopefully time for a couple of extra questions as well. But thank you very much for that insightful presentation today.
Thanks for
cheers. I will move on now to Leila, who will be sharing her experiences and the experiences of POA from actually putting some of this into practice in Cameroon. You're on mute.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting UPOA on this important webinar, and thank you, Juan Carlos, for the really interesting and pragmatic strategies that you share. And for sure, we will also assess them to see if we can implement them also at UPOA. So my name is Leila Ayad. I'm working for UPOA since October 2020. I'm in charge of the methods, documentation management system, and in implementing our environmental and social management system. Today, I will present you a little bit UPOA, the social cultural context of Cameroon, where we are operating, and what are our strategies to overcome those challenges for better transparency and customer satisfaction. Next slide, please. Thank you. So UPOA was created in 2014 and has started distributing solar home system in the West Cameroon in 2016. 3 projects are distributing so far, from the entry model with only light up to the premium model, we'll say, with a TV. And all those projects comes with a cash or pay-go offer. And therefore, yes, the credits credits and loans fact that we have to disclose also. Now we are implemented in most of the regions of Cameroon, and we have more than 30,000 installations, impacting then more than 2,000 lives across the country. So Cameroon, it's a country which counts about 26 million inhabitants. The density, it's moderate with 50% per square kilometer. 10 million of those 26 million inhabitants still do not have access to electricity. Most of them are located in the rural regions. The country has 2 official languages, the French and English. But what is important to state here is that there is more than 250 local languages spoken and identified. And really, if you go in the rural regions, some inhabitants will speak only those local languages. The literacy rate is about 67%. Just as a comparison for the local languages, to see here the specificity of Cameroon, you have about 40 spoken languages identified in Kenya, 17 in Zambia, and 26 in Senegal. So Cameroon is definitely, here is definitely a challenge for distributing in Cameroon. It's a rich cultural richness, but it's a difficulty for us. Next slide, please. So all those socio-cultural indicators brings challenges in verbal and written communications for UPOA agents with our prospects and clients. So in both commercial and customer care processes, we have implemented specific practices to set clear and transparent communication, terms and conditions, products proposed, etc., to then therefore ensure better customer satisfaction, impacting also on a better recovery payment behavior, and of course, the brand's image and reputation for upscaling our sales and a better implementation rates. Next slide, please. So what are those specific strategies that have been implemented? So first of all, in the commercial processes, we have created visual instructions, which are provided in each kit sold to our customer and are presented during the prospection with our agents. Those visual instructions will go from how to treat and care of your products for a longer lifetime, but also how to make a payment, and also what is the cost. So you were mentioning before, what is the cost, the cash cost versus the credit cost, so that they can understand that there is a difference in cost due to credit, and that the company the risk and the company is taken. We also recruit our field agents directly in the appointed distribution areas, so that we know that first they will speak the spoken language, which are identified in this location. They will also be a better, friendliness, or they will know better the people around us, so better trust on the company. And this is applicable for all our agents. So that will be from the technician team to the commercial team, from the people also who are in charge to recover the monthly payments. We also do the same in our customer care process, meaning that in our contact center, which is reachable 6 days a week, and for which the number is available on each of our kits written in big digits, so that it's easily accessible and visible for each customer. We are also recruiting few of our call agents, which are speaking the main local languages. So we do not have 250 languages represented in our customer care center, but we have still like Bassa or Balike, etc., the main languages which are there, so that if a client call and has difficulty to be understood, we can redirect him to the right call agent. Then after each payment, and this is I think something said by Juan Carlos, the client will receive an automatic SMS. So including what was the amount transferred, how much days it converted, and also how much a payment has been done so far up to date, so how much so far they have paid, and how much is still to pay to cover the full price, the full kit price. We also do specific awareness campaign to all our clients using SMS, flyers, local radio spots in local languages, and also using the traditional authorities, which can be which can have a better impact and maybe be more listened by the local community when we pass through the chef or other notable, which will have a better contact also and with the customers. Next slide, please. So here is an example of a user manual, which is distributed in all our kits. With we can see colors to see, okay, what is good to do, what's not good to do. And also, of course, pictograms and pictures of how to treat and care each part so that the products can have a better lifetime. And even though our products have 2 years warranty, we also, of course, want it to be well cared so that it can have a better lifetime and better customer satisfaction and reduce the electronic waste at the end of the lifetime. The next slide, please. Here is also another example of a visual instruction that we put in all of our kits. So it's the payment instruction. There is two main mobile money network that we use here, Orange Money and MTN Money. Here is the one for Orange Money. So we will show how a customer will do to enter the code and so each step so that we make sure that he can do easily his payments. So that, of course, it's good for the client so that they can have easily access to his lights, but also for us to make sure that we also have easily our monthly payments. So here it's in French and you can see all the steps up to the SMS confirmation that I was telling you, how much was paid and the sold. This is the step 7. And yeah, this is another example. And I'm done with this. So it was few pragmatic strategies that we implemented, but definitely now with the intervention of Juan Carlos, we will see how to better increase our transparency still. Thank you and welcome for any questions.
Thanks, Leila. Yeah, again, any questions, just pop them in the chats there. So just one very quick one from myself. APOA made a commitment to the Consumer Protection Code and have been doing the self-assessment annually since then. Has doing that self-assessment helped you to kind of identify areas of kind of consumer-facing transparency? Have you made any changes, following that as well?
So yeah, actually, for instance, all the visual instructions and manual were already deployed prior during the CPC self-assessment, but still, yes, it has increased. For instance, the implementation of agent code, which speaks the language, was following also this first assessment, which was done in 2019. So how to better access our customers, especially in the rural regions, and with the language, there was just something about reading the contracts, I remember, in the CPC, because as we could see, the literacy rate is about 70%. So yeah, how we make sure that in our commercial discourse, we are saying the key facts and terms and conditions. So this was definitely also, let's say, improved with doing the assessments. So I would say there were some germs and things, but having the assessment comfort us in the way that it was the right direction and make sure that we need to go even further. that's why we are not yet 100%, but we are improving each year.
Yeah, it's a process, and I think, you know, good to know that just small changes can actually have an impact on consumers and you know, repayment rates as well. Fantastic. Thank you. So to finish us off then, I will hand over now to my colleague Puk, who is the Junior Project Manager for Performance and Investment with Gogla. And she'll take us through some of the kind of overarching lessons and key bits of takeaways and recommendations for companies in the sector.
Yes, so hello everyone, and thank you, Rebecca. And of course, thank you, Leila and Juan Carlos, for your very interesting presentations. I hope I will have something good to add to that. Let me see. So I will first give a little bit of background on the transparency principle, which I think and hope you are already quite familiar with. But just as a background, so transparency is about a company sharing clear and sufficient information on the product, the service, the payment plan, but as well on personal data privacy practices. And this is all in order to make sure that consumers can make an informed decision. And it is as well about a company sharing this information at an appropriate time. So before, during, and after sales, to see when sharing information makes the most sense to the consumer. As well, it is about the company communicating in a way so that consumers can easily understand this language and manner. And with transparency, it is, I think this principle is of particular importance because it underpins other principles of the Consumer Protection Code, such as responsible sales and pricing, as well as data privacy and fair and respectful treatment. And I think the importance of transparency has been shown and demonstrated quite clearly by Juan Carlos. So I think there's that has been quite well demonstrated. However, transparency was identified as one of the more challenging areas when the Consumer Protection Code was developed. And this was particularly in relation to the contracts for pay-go sales. And in research that was done together with 60 decibels, some consumer insights were gathered that highlighted the impact of poor transparency, as you can see in these quotes. So consumers perceived poor communication or a lack of information as a problem as well. And the fact that transparency was identified as a challenge for off-grid solar companies can be dedicated to a variety of factors that you can see here. For example, the growing pay-go model that has its own specific complexities with combining financial, product, and service elements. Often as well, companies make use of agent-based sales models where the agents and the point of sale is quite far removed from the control of a headquarter. And I think here, Leila's example demonstrated as well quite clear that if there are many languages operating in a market, communication can be quite difficult, as well as when consumers have low literacy levels. And in some cases, there's also a lack of digital connectivity. And to show the impact of poor transparency, to add a bit on that, I will take you through a little example. So if a customer does not understand the payment plan because it is written in complex language, he might stop paying or may not be able to pay because he doesn't know how to pay. Then the company will lose revenue in return. Or if the consumer is not able to pay, his product will be locked and the consumer doesn't understand why, and he might think that the product is broken. So he will call the customer service, and the company will have to send a technician, and this will cost money as well. And I think in general, we can say that a lack of transparency or poor transparency practices will lead to unhappy and unsatisfied customers. And this will in return as well lead to lower brand reputation of a company. And if customers, of course, cannot pay because they don't know how, or if they have a payment plan that does not fit their income level, for example, this will have an impact on the portfolio risk and default levels as well, as was shown, of course, very clearly by Juan Carlos. And in the briefing note, we made recommendations based on the consumer journey of an off-grid solar customer. And the focus in each stage of this consumer journey is a bit different. So in the pre-sales and marketing stage, it is especially important to really aim at enabling the consumers to make an informed decision. So to think about what information is crucial to the customer to make a decision about the purchase. So this should include pricing information, product information, and ideally this information is as well shared in different formats and through different channels, so that, for example, customers can bring the material home to discuss with their relatives. In the onboarding stage, it is essential to confirm that the client has really understood all this information before you continue with the purchase, and adapt to a client's needs if necessary, as well as allowing a cooling off period. And when it comes to payments, it is really important to make sure, of course, that a customer knows how to make a payment, and as well to provide these reminders and notifications when payments are due and what the account balance is. If we go further to the after sales and customer service, it is really important to be transparent from the beginning. So to make sure that a customer is aware of the existence of a complaint procedure, of the customer center, and what can as well be expected from the service, so that the customer can manage their expectations. And to assess the operations through these stages of the customer journey, in the briefing note, we have suggested to make use of a 3-pillar approach that looks into the what, the how, and the when. So I think it might be straightforward, but what is really, as I said, think about what is the crucial information and the most important content for the consumer. The how is, how can we communicate this information in the best way, and in a way that it is understandable for different types of consumers. And then there's the when. So timing is as well really essential, and think about when what is an appropriate time to share these different kinds of information. And to clarify this approach, I will just take you through the example of consumer contracts. And here on the right, I think you probably cannot read it. And I think from the poll as well, we found that if you would get it, you probably would not read it. So as there's often a lot of information in the terms and conditions or in a contract, so it's really important to think about, okay, how can we maybe reduce this kind of information into the most crucial ones for the consumer. And for our sector, if we talk about a cash sale, of course, we should disclose the cash price and the product specifications. If we are talking about a pay-go sale, it is important to add as well the total cost of ownership, the repayment plan, the payment options, and if there are any other possibilities to pay. and of course the fees or penalties if they are there for late or non-payment. And lastly, some information about the warranty terms and the data privacy, especially when we talk about information that is going to a credit reference bureau. And then there is the how. So if you have decided on what information to share, it's good to think about how can we share this information. And for this, we suggest to make use of a key fact statement, and the positive results have been shown by CGAP and their work. But here we think this is a good supplement to the contract that shows all the key information in a clear and in a simple way, using visual aids, so that it is really easily understandable for consumers. And as Rebecca said before, we will share with you the slide deck, and the link to download this template will be in there as well. So we really encourage you to use this. And then there is the when. When we talk about consumer contracts, it is important to make sure that a customer has enough time to read and digest all this crucial information before continuing with the sale and before the installation, and to allow a cooling off period so that the customer can withdraw from the purchase if they want to, without any penalty. Then to summarize, some main takeaways. So this is really some tangible things that companies can do and think about to improve their transparency practices. I think, not surprisingly, first of all, review your consumer contract and implement a key fact statement. So check if all the crucial information is there, how it is communicated. And now that we know that most people do not actually read everything, maybe indeed make sure that there is a supplementary, more readable, more understandable key fact statement in it. Then, you could add a simple step to your onboarding process. So I think many companies already make use of a welcome or an onboarding call, but we think it would be a good opportunity to check in this call with your consumers if they really have understood all the key information. Then there is training your agents. I think, ensuring that agents receive training on how to explain prices, how to explain product specifications in a simple and understandable way is really important, and make sure that this is a practical training that incorporates experiences and field-based experiences, and maybe make use of a peer-to-peer or a coaching. So that is really it's really a practical training, because I think sometimes you know what to do, but it's good to make it more tangible and practical. Then the last one is to spreek hun taal, which I don't know if we have any Dutch people in the audience, but I think most people will not understand, but it means to speak their language. So try to support local languages where you can. And if this is not feasible, as maybe in the case of Cameroon, where over 250 languages are spoken, try to create a language in a different way. So indeed, using visual aids, using colors, using different kinds of things than only words that may help the consumer to understand. And then again, if you haven't done so already, we would really like to encourage you to take a look at our briefing notes. So we can hopefully work together to improve transparency in our sector, and make sure that we have happy and protected consumers that will give positive responses like the ones we can see here. And with that, I want to thank you and to say that there's much more information to be found on our website at the Consumer Protection Hub. And if there's any questions, you can always drop us an email. And for now, we will have a little time as well for a Q&A. So put your questions in the box or in the chat, and then as well to Leila or Juan Carlos if you still have them, and we can answer them. So thank you again.
Thank you, Puck. Yeah, if there's any questions, do just share them. Otherwise, just whilst we wait for anything to come in, I'd like to just say thank you to Juan Carlos for demonstrating the benefits of transparency to consumers and the clear relationship between, simplifying the disclosure of, throughout the consumer journey and providing better information at key points as well. And really sharing that between that and the better repayment rates. Thanks also to Leila for showing how small changes, even in really challenging off-grid contexts, can make a big difference to operational and consumer-facing transparency. Okay, so as Gogla, we are always open to hearing from companies within the sector, hearing from your experiences, and always wanting to speak to companies about innovations and things that they're trying to help kind of meet these challenges and really kind of improve the consumer experience in the off-grid sector. So do keep us posted and let us know what you're up to. Otherwise, I encourage everyone to check out the Consumer Protection Code if it's something that's new to you, and make a commitment or an endorsement to that. If there's no questions, I'll say thanks to everyone for joining, and hope to see you all again at a future presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.